Here we are in the spray booth. Last night, well, for me it was last night, I separated the resin wheels from the casting stubs, and I'm now going to prime them. It's very... I've also put them in the ultrasonic cleaner just to make sure that all the dust and rubbish is off of them. I'm going to paint them with Alclad grey microfiller primer. It's pretty important to prime resin because it's well, actually it's very important to prime all plastics because of the surface structure. It just doesn't always like to hold on to paint. So a good primer will help with that, which is what I'm going to do now with the Alclad grey microfiller. And as it's an enamel, it's going to be, well, I put the extractor on anyway because nobody likes breathing in paint fumes, or paint for that matter. Anyway, more so with enamels and lacquers. Anyway, there's not much to this. This section is going to be fairly short. The nice thing about a grey primer is that it shows up any imperfections. Especially on plastics. Resins as well, but the resin tends to can have a slightly more dull finish. But a coat of primer really helps highlight any mistakes you've made, or areas that still need need some extra attention. There we go. That's all there is to this. As soon as this is dry, I will flip these over and do the other side. Yeah, I won't bother with the other side of these because you can't see it. They'll be on the inside of that is on the inside of this, and there's no way you can see that from any angle other than from the inside of the wheel, which is impossible. So yeah, as soon as this is this is dry, I'll flip these over, paint that side, and then I'll start with painting the insides of these with Alclad Aluminium, and then giving it a wash and a bit of dirt, and then I'll paint these at the same time. Shall I paint these? No. I'll paint those aluminium, mask this, and then paint the tyres. Obviously after I've painted the rims on the other side as well. Now, after putting the grey on, you can see the half-assed attempt at reintroducing the tread blocks that I did last night. So obviously that part of the tyre is going to be going towards terra firma, same as here. It's not too bad on the whole, but thankfully I won't be displaying this thing wheels towards the sky. Not in this round at least. Cool, excellent. Moving on to the next part. Here we are again, back in the spray booth. I'm going to be painting the wheels, specifically the inner rims on these guys, and potentially the outer rims as well. Let's see how far we get. I'll be using Duraluminium again, and it says here, prime surfaces with alkyd grey primer sealing not necessary. So I've gone and done that. I did the struts with a Vallejo polyurethane, black polyurethane surface primer. The difference in primers will probably give us a slight difference in tone. The wheels will therefore be a little bit lighter, probably. You might not necessarily see it in this instance. Excuse me, because of the way that the struts have been weathered and how small these components actually are. And there's a disconnect between the two components as well, because there'll be the tyre between the rim and the strut itself. But nevertheless, these are primed and they're well cured, because I primed them a few days ago. So yeah, let's go ahead with painting these things. Now it's a lovely, lovely summer or spring day outside. I should really be playing outside, but I've got a few moments before the family come back from being out. Left work early today because it's it's Easter break, and they've given us a few days off, which is enjoy it while you can in this industry I work in, because we're at the point now where we still get bank holidays and days off. Once they start running cameras, it's a different story. Yes, so I'm going to enjoy it while I can. So now I'm going to be painting these wheels, and probably this time tomorrow I'll be assembling a swing in the back garden for the boy. A little bit of alkyd in there, not too much, don't need to drown it. There. And there goes that thing. This. Yeah. This stuff goes on so nicely. It's airbrush ready for those who have never worked with it before. It's a lacquer, so it's a bit stinky, which is why there's a fan on in the background. You can thin it, but there's no need really. As I said, I've got the Vallejo metals as well, but I'm personally finding them a little bit hard to work with at the moment. I guess it's all about practice, but for some reason they don't. What's the word? atomize the same way that this stuff does. This stuff feels a lot finer in its makeup, its composition rather. Right, I'm going to let this sit for about 10-20 minutes, so let it cure properly, and then I will coat them with where is it? And I'll get a coat of Alclad Aqua Gloss, which will help with the washes. Because then the washes will flow neatly into all the corners and nooks and crannies and not pull so much on all the surfaces, and make it easier to remove them or swish them around on the surface as well. So right, that'll be up in a moment. The clear coat is on. It was a quick blast with the Aqua Gloss, which also dries nice and quick. So right now I will put on some washes. I said I'll start with the inside here. Steady. Not going to see that much in there, but what I will do is I will go with a brown, or dark brown, which will be some Agrax Earthshade. I might mix a little bit of, where'd I put it? I need to tidy up. Yeah, Nuln Oil in there. I won't go too mad because I still want to see some of the definition of stuff inside there. Because of that, I will just mix a bit of the two together. These are quite, I really do like these. They're especially good for small detail parts like this. I wouldn't use them so much for like large panels or panel line washes per se, because they might dry too quickly, and they're very hard to shift when they do. That's the Nuln Oil. It is quite, yeah, it's quite brown and dark. It's almost like coffee. So I'll just add a little bit of the black to it, not too much. Pipettes, very handy, very cheap, get lots of them. There we go, just mix the two together, but swirl them around. Right. This gives us a nice sort of dark, oily, greasy colour. Something that would collate on the inside of the wheels, inside of the rims, where you'd have the brake dust and just general gunk accumulating. I said I won't go too mad because you still want to see some of the detail that's in there. So I can darken those. There. You can lift some of this off. There you go. Set that aside. A general rule of thumb when it comes to weathering techniques, painting techniques, is if I start asking myself, have I put enough on? Should I do some more? So I immediately stop. Because from that point on, you're most likely to go too far and then ruin it. Or at least that's the case in my experience. I have ruined many, many kits in the past. And I have also found a hair wedged in here. Make sure your parts are dust free before you start, kids. It's not a big deal because, as I said, this is buried within the wheel well, or within inside the wheel. Right, I'm in danger of lifting paint off, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It's all hidden underneath the spokes anyway. I mean, if you can see that when the wheel is assembled, you, my friend, have better eyes than I have. There we go. That's those. Put a light wash of this on here as well. When this is all together, they're going to get a dust of Pacific dust on there, so that they can sort of blend together and also have a bit more of a dusty feel, because it's for being connected to the earth, quite literally. Because the wheels are the first place the aircraft comes in contact with the ground, or at least that is the intended plan. If that's not the case, then you have bigger issues than dirty undercarriage. So yeah, as I pointed out earlier, the gloss coat helps the wash pool where it's supposed to. Without it, it can with a matte coat. Like I explained in the video for the Trojan, the matte coat can soak up the wash and make it all the washes and the oils and your weathering materials, and make it very hard to adjust it to a point that you're happy with it. You have to be very, very precise with what you're doing if you're going to go straight onto a matte coat. Because if you don't, then you can sometimes end up having to repaint the whole thing, which is less than ideal. Wouldn't be the first time though. Well, when I say that, it's, in my experience, it needs a repaint. It's going to live in its box. Dab with a cotton bud just to take up a bit of the excess. But too much in places can make it look a bit dark. Although I might go a little bit darker towards the wheel hub itself, where the axle meets the wheel. Because that'll be a point where there would be grease and oils and trapped dirt. Nothing is without reason. So yeah, let's go a little bit heavier towards the rim, or towards the hub rather. Not too much. And I can always add more black or add more brown, depending on how it comes out in a minute. So yeah, that could be quite nice. In fact, I might just do that while it's still wet. Do a wet on wet technique, I suppose. Let it sit there. One thing I want to try is a technique used a lot in scenic art, on large props and movie sets, is going wet on wet, where I wet down the surface of the object with a thinner or water, and spritz the wash on with either flick it with a brush or lightly airbrush it over, and by doing so it will blend and feather using the already wet base. So that wet base could be thinners, could be as it could be water, could be alcohol, could be anything depending on the surface underneath. I might in fact do that with this one. See how it goes. See how it works. Right, I'm going to leave these to dry, and then later, if I have a moment, what I will do is mask the hubs and then paint on either Vallejo black grey, which I have here somewhere. I had it here a moment ago. I put it all. You can never find things when you tidy things up. Should never tidy. Either black grey or Tamiya rubber black, or could even do NATO black for that matter. That's also a nice sort of greyish blue. Yeah, I might do that. I don't know. I'll see. See how I feel. And then when that's on, what I will do is take a dusty colour, probably Tamiya buff, if I have some, and I do. Yeah, let's ready this. So I'll take some Tamiya buff and I will airbrush it just gently along the face of the tyre where it would meet the ground, and that will just also sort of come up against the sides. Maybe give it a black wash, and then when that's done, I don't know, I'm still working it out in my head. Half the time I make this stuff up as I go along. Oh, here we go. Black grey. See, knew I didn't tidy it up. As I said, half the time I make things up as I go along. No two builds are the same. I sort of half remember how I did them in the past, but most of the time I sort of forget. Which can be a little bit annoying, because I'll have a model and I go, wow, I really like how that looks and how that worked out, and I'm never able to replicate them, especially with paint textures. A trick that the guys did on a stop motion show I worked on was they had meticulously written down every single step they did and all the paint ratios for how they achieved something. Which is something I should probably do. Keep a little notebook of my process, and then you can say yes, this worked, or no, that didn't work, or I changed this, or use it, leave it completely as is. Use this technique again. So yeah, I'd have to start looking into doing that. It's a very meticulous way of doing it, especially if you've got loads of repeats of an object that needs to be seen on multiple sets, or needs to have replacements. So to get that paint process done properly, or consistently, having notes is a very, very good idea. So yeah, that's this for now. I will come back later and we will start painting the tyres. So there'll be these tyres, as well as the tail wheel, which is still glossy for some reason. Anyway, as I said, we'll sort that out later. What I'll also do before these are, before I call these finished, is because I put a gloss coat on them for the wash, I will give them either a dull coat or a satin coat, just to seal everything in, make sure it's all in place, and then a flat coat on the tyres themselves. Yes, more of this later. This has had time to dry. It's looking quite nice. If I can get this thing to focus. Right. Move some lights around over here. Pinewood Studios, this isn't. It's a lot cheaper. So, that out of the way, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut some masks to go over here. So go over these guys. I'll only do it for the one side, because what I'm going to do on the other is just stuff some blue tack into it, so that it's because on this side the masking isn't that important, because the rims, those parts are going to drop into here, so I can be a little bit less less precise on this side. Just going to wedge that in there. Like so. Mush, mush, mush. That's one. That will also allow me to take one of these guys and skewer it. Gives me something to hold on to now. Same for the other side. That was looking really nice. I'll take some close-up pictures and put them on the Facebook page for you to have a look at, and on Instagram. The lighting in here doesn't do any justice, so I'll do it tomorrow morning in the cold light of day. Oh, yeah, it's quite subtle. I'm also obviously going to be adding to this with the Pacific sand or Pacific dust, just to help blend it all in. I might also do that with the rest of the undercarriage as well. Let's give it a light dusting, because that dust will obviously settle into nooks and crannies on that as well. Did you say as well twice in that? I don't know. I can speak English good. That's those. These I'll set aside for now. Let's make some space. Now, the way we go about this is I will measure the rim, which is 9.5 mil. Then we'll divide that by 2, which is 4.75. Clap that down. I'll go to this fella, bring this back to 0. So that according to this, let's be just on that line, right about there. And then make sure I extend the blade. There we go. Put that here for a second. We take some masking tape that I know will be wide enough. And I said the other day, this is not a, what was it earlier? This is not a cheap tool by any means, but it's very much worth it. So you put it down, make sure that the blade is in there, or touching the masking tape, and then one. That there. And you were left with perfect circles. I hope that they are the correct size. It's not like we don't have enough masking tape. Seems to be a little bit too big. That's fine. So we can, there we go. Yeah, it might be a little bit on the big side. It's marginally big though. Literally just covering that part of the rim. I might just try it again, but make it a little bit smaller. There. Let's try that one again. I will see if I can put a link to where I got this from, but it's if you can read that, shadowhobby.com. Not sure if that's still where you can get them from. That's where I got this one, at least. I think they retail for about $50. I said it's not cheap, but it's good. If you consider the number of canopy masks and wheel masks you're going to save on this. And obviously not just for building models. Anything really. You just need a circle, and it goes up to about 50 mil or so diameter. Right. Now for my next trick is trying to get these things off of the. There we go. Off of the cutting mat. Dare I say, this one's a bit on the small side. We're okay. We're okay. Or are we? Nope. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Not by much, but just a smidge. We need it baby bear. Just right. There. Riveting television, this, people. Riveting. Okay, let's try that again. This is not an exact science. We'll get there in the end, though. Although I might fast forward through this part for you. It's a bit boring watching me screw up making little circles of masking tape. There we go, 3 times a charm. Perfect-ish. There. Now with this masked, we can move over and paint the tyres. I'll just airbrush them. It's a lot easier and quicker than brush painting them. Much neater as well. There we go. Okay, I'm going to start with the tyres. I ended up using this one, Mr. Hobby Aqueous Rot-Schwarz Carbon Black, which I think will work quite nicely. I've mixed it with Mr. Colour Thinners, which is meant for their lacquers, but it works equally well with these and Tamiya. Of course, I say this now, I might end up melting the paint off of it, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That's what editing's for. Give this another coat in a moment. Park this over here. see what this looks like. There, look at that. It's very nice. There we go. Very nice. Very nice finish on that. Nice and round. I just remember those horrible days of just carefully taking a brush and then just very carefully painting along those rims, and then breathing too hard, or the fly goes past and just go right across it. That's much better. Right, now I'll let that sit for a moment. I'm going to change the paint in there for a dust color and do that next. Right, it's time for the dust. I've got a very thin mixture in here because it is supposed to be dust. I might actually just lower the temperature on the pressure on the airbrush, so I don't end up blasting spiders from Mars all over this thing. A little goes a long way with this. What it is going to be a base for what's to come. So square that up on there. So on top of this, I'll be adding washes with MIG pigments, and then blending that into the rim or into the tyre. So it's just so we've got something as a base to start with. All it needs. Any more, it'll start to look a bit weird. So all we need is a little base for the rest to be built up onto. Like I said earlier, once you start wondering if you've done enough, immediately stop. There we go. Should do it. Let's compare the two. Might need a little bit more. A little bit, not too much. Slight overall dusting as well, and I mean very slight. Cool, so that was Tamiya buff. I'm gonna let this dry for a bit and then move over to the bench. We'll use some pigments on this instead yeah, we'll use some pigments next up. I've gone ahead and mixed some of the Pacific dust with a dash of Tamiya thinners, creating a well, essentially paste, but very, very watery paste. What I'm going to do this now is just brush it onto the wheels one at a time and see how far we get. And when this dries, it'll dry as a pale, sort of pale yellow, which is what this is. Because it's a pigment, a dry pigment, we can then remove what we don't need. Or at least that's the plan. See, I haven't used these in a very, very long time. I used to know what I was doing with them, but so it's been a while. Sort of trying to remember how these processes worked. Sort of goes on like a very diluted paint, almost water-like. And then once it's set, or once it's dried, I'll attempt to remove it using either my finger or paint over it, I guess. We'll see how it works out. So what I've done is I've just put the thicker mixture around the contact patch of the tire, and now I'm also just dragging lines from the center out to simulate how wet sand and dust would interact with a spinning tire. When you look at any truck or car tire, mostly probably truck tires are a better example because there's a bigger surface area to it. They all have these lines of dust radiating from the outside. When they get wet and when they move and spin, they obviously fling dust and water due to centrifugal force towards the outside of the tire. So that's what this is supposed to be doing, hopefully. I'm gonna do a wash, or just a little bit of a bead on the bead, as it were, because you know how dust likes to settle in cracks like that. It doesn't have to be at all uniform, and that's the beauty of nature. It rarely is, unless you're looking at complex crystals. So when it comes to this sort of thing, you can be as random as you want. There is no wrong, well there is, but you've got a lot of leeway when it comes to this sort of thing. Strangely, in some cases, you can replicate something that's real to the finest detail, and it'll just not look right. Sometimes I look at things in the real world and go, if I were to make a model of that, no one would believe me. It would look stupid. Yeah, that's how things are, and that you find that unless you show loads of reference, people will just not believe you. Yeah, but that's actually what it looked like. I suppose it's a expectation of reality versus reality. I'll let this dry and then see what we've got. Then when that's done, I will take some smoke or black pigment and just gently rub that along the contact patch as well. So with any luck, this will dry out and look nice and bright like that stuff over there. He says. If I do screw it up, well, I'll just have to paint them again. It's not the end of the world. Can be frustrating though, obviously. It wouldn't be the first time. I've got a 72nd scale Phantom, which is at present the banner on my website, on my YouTube page. And for some reason, every now and again, I painted it with Vallejo paints, Vallejo Model Air, and for some reason, every now and again, I'd mask off a panel to add some effect to it, and then I'd gently take the mask off, and it would peel sheets of paint up with it. It was just so frustrating. Oops. So yeah, the number of times I actually had to go back and refinish that one was just ridiculous. It went on far longer than it should have. So yeah, I will do the other one, let them dry, and then see where we are with that. All right, well, I've been working with this one. I'm finding that this is coming up a little bit on the yellow side. So I've been adding a little bit of Gulf War sand, which is a bit stony and a little bit less yellow. It's a bit of a darker shade. I'm reasonably happy with that. And this is the one time when handling these things is fine, because you naturally rub away the dust where it would on a regular contact patch. So I'm going to leave this one for what it is. I will take some close-up pictures later. I've also glued in the hub. And it looks quite nice. I'm going to set that one aside. So I'm going to attempt to replicate what I did with that one to this one. I started, like I did with the other one, by brushing this into the grooves. I might go a little bit lighter on it this time. Just down the center of the thread. trying not to create hot spots and highlights. And then around the bead, I'll redo this on the other side as well when the other part of the wheel is installed. And then just flick the center out. Get those run marks. So this is an axle hub on this side. Grease and oil and hydraulic fluid will leak along this part, collect on the axle, and as soon as the aircraft lifts off and it's spinning wheels, it'll fling that stuff down the sidewalls of the tires. That will then take everything with it, including, and then have everything stick to it, which obviously includes all the dust that's been collecting in and around the hub and has been kicked up by the propeller. I'll redo this as soon as the other part is in. I tried using the smoke, but it just came across as a little too dark, a little too black. I suppose I'd have to mix it in with one of these two as well, just to get a better look. Although that one looks fine as it is, so I'm going to leave it as that. Right. Now, as soon as this was partway dry, what I did was also take a cotton bud with the powder directly onto the tread as well. It's been so long since I've done this. I usually used to do this with armoured vehicles, but I haven't done one of those in ages. I started on a Meng King Tiger. It's a really nice kit, and I've got the separate links for them. Each link has two teeny track pins. Didn't think that one through when I bought it. It's really nice, and the tracks work and look beautiful, but it's just such a pain, such a schlep to do them all. I have no doubt the result will be fantastic when it's done, though. Whenever that may or may not be. I don't know where it is. I think it's down here. So yeah, that's going to take a while before I finish that one. A moment ago, I took the girlfriend's hairdryer and helped speed things along a bit. I have a feeling, if this stuff wasn't so thick, so thinly diluted, it wouldn't have this weird yellow hue on it. Although it is drying, and it is drying quite pale, which is nice. I might just make some of these streaks a little bit more prominent. I'll do that on the other one as well. And once it's drier, I can then blend it. See, there's not much going on there. So I'll take a slightly thicker brew and just do that. I'm literally making this up as I go along. It's important to go from the hub out. Keep it believable. Once this dries, so I'll blend it either by rubbing it with my finger or with a cotton bud. Right. See what this does. So I'm going to take the cotton bud raw with the dry powder. Yeah, it's still a bit wet. So I'll come back to that in a moment. If you can make that out. That's on there. Bit of a blend. I'm so out of practice with pigments. More of a suggestion than anything else, to be fair. And I'm going to have a feeling that when I coat it, give it a bit of a dust with some matte varnish, that a lot of that might disappear. So I may have to revisit that at some point. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, yeah, I'll let this dry or sit for a bit. I can think about it, and I'm going to go give this one a blitz with a hair dryer. Although it could do with a bit more. It seems a bit on the pale side. Interesting. That's a good mix. Yeah. I have been known to airbrush this stuff in the past. Also works quite nicely. Some say it wears down your airbrush, and others say it doesn't do any harm. I can see the argument for not doing it, because there's very fine granular particles that are running through, presumably brass components, and that would have a detrimental effect. Any abrasive will degrade anything it passes through. such as carbon fiber filament on 3D printers tends to eat nozzles, and also paper. Paper is incredibly abrasive. Back in the day, I worked for an engineering company, and one of the things I had to draw up as a draftsman was an offcut shoot for a paper plant. What it was I think it was like a 8 or 15 mil wall thickness pipe, about 120 or 150 mil in diameter, which was the part that caught the offcuts of paper as it was being put through blades to keep it to bring it to the desired width it needed to be. Apparently, these solid steel pipes would be completely worn out in 3 months. That's how quick and how abrasive it was. I was astounded. I didn't know that until then, how incredibly abrasive it was. I suppose you'll find out how abrasive it is if you accidentally take a seamstress's scissors and cut paper with it. They do take a very dim view of that because it blunts their scissors. I don't think so. It's just paper, but that's how you get paper cuts as well. If you look at paper under a microscope, it's like a saw. Right, this must be getting boring now. So, again, I'm going to take this into the other room, give it a blow dry, and add some Gulf War sand to it. Well, it appears that the effect on this side is a lot more subtle than on that one. What I'm going to do is just take some of this dry powder and scrub that into it. There we go. That's better. It's very sticky as well, which I can only assume is the thinners at work on the paint. Which is good, because it means it'll fix the pigment in place. It's bad because it means that I've reactivated the paint and it might take forever to dry. So, yeah, we shall see. There we go. A bit more over here. Scrubby, scrub, scrub. There we go. Now a little bit of Gulf War sand. It's a little bit darker. Give you some tonal variation. That's okay, that's it like that. And then let's give it a rub. Like that. And there you go. All there is to it, really. And let's glue the hub in wherever I left it. Oh, here we are. Just going to put a few dots of glue on here. Not too many. A little dab will do you. This is where I stick it to my finger on camera. Literally sticking it to the man. I'm going to line up the tops of those holes with the little lines in there, so that the little triangular shaped holes are central. There we go. Yeah. Not sure I'm 100% convinced with them, but they'll do. I clearly need to do a bit more practice on this sort of thing. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. It's a journey, folks, and it's been a long time. So bear with me. But for now, they are okay. I still need to do the same procedure to the tail wheel, which, as I said, is looking decidedly glossy. So I'm probably going to have to give this a coat of flat before I continue. Because otherwise, might work. Let's see how it works. See how we do. Just take a wash of this stuff and put it over it. Nice thick, goopy wash. Up the sides as well. Should we get into these corners? Yeah. Yeah, once that's dried-ish, I'll again rub that down. Put that there. And thinking about it, I've got the black and I've got the sandy colours. What I could do is I could just make a little pile of this, mix the three together, and see what happens if I rub that onto those tyres to the outside. Cut to me repainting them. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah? A little bit of black. This stuff, that stuff, a little bit goes a very, very long way. Not sure what it is, that it's hardy. A bit of Gulf War sand. Still, I'll use this to stir it up. Yeah, that might work. See, on its own, the black was very black. Now, just cutting it, as it were, with the sand colour, it's a lot more palatable, a lot less stark. Oh, that's nice. Still get the dust in between. It's just muted a bit, just toned it down a bit. It's not as bright. The contrast isn't quite as in your face. It's more like a tire instead of a brickwork. There we go. Yeah, that's much better. There. Yeah, that's lovely. I like that. That's a lot better. See, I wasn't digging that. It's very, very, very bright. It could be because, I mean, you wouldn't think it, but this bright yellow goop is the same as this pale powder. It's just the way it wets, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, this just helps knock it back a smidge. See, I told you I was making it up as I was going along. Yeah, that's it. That's better. I like that. Cool. Keep that as is. As for this one, yeah, this needs to dry still. I don't know what's going to go with that. What's going to happen with this guy? It's a bit weird. For some reason, it went completely completely glossy. I didn't use any glossy products on it, on that wheel. Other than, well, I used the no, that was afterwards, was it? I can't remember. But for some reason, it's glossier than it really should be. So I'm just going to use the dry powder neat, as it were. Give it a bit of a brush, a bit of a scrub. Now, ideally, this stuff likes a nice flat surface, or matte surface, because you can then really grind the pigments into the surface of the paint, and it stays quite nicely. Now, use a clean side on that, or not. Use this side. To reactivate it a bit. It's sort of caked, not so much caked, but it's dried in a weird fashion. Might be my choice of thinners. I went with the EX20 because it's a little less harsh on the plastic below it, or on the paints below it. Or at least that's the theory. Forgetting the old golf. Well, that's not good. I think that's seen better days. Told you these are old. See, when did I buy these? I was still living in the Netherlands, which was there's a model building club that I'd frequent, which was held at one of the guys' work establishment, which was an online model shop. It was loads of fun. So I got them while I was there. So it's been in 2005-ish, 2004, 2005. Yeah, I go there every week or month. Was it every week? No, I think it was every month or so. Periodically, as I said, it's a long time ago. But that's when I got these. And they clearly have seen better days. I'm not sure this is working all that well. Okay. Here's what it is. It's not very hard to get into it because it's a single piece molding. The tire is part of the strut on the mold, which is not my preferred method of business, but it is what it is. I'll tell you, it is. No, it is a separate piece, but it's a separate piece that joins up here, as opposed to the wheel itself. There we go. That'll do, I guess. Not fantastic, but yeah. Is that it? Watch me do this for the next 7 hours. Just going back and forth and back and forth. It's all about experimenting. Should never be too worried about experimenting with models. I mean, at the end of the day, it's only a model. You can always repaint it. Trickiest bits is, of course, when you fog canopies or crack a part. That's fairly essential. But these days, being able to obtain spare parts is a lot easier than the one time I accidentally cracked the canopy on an AV8B that I got for Christmas. Cracked the front windshield, so it forever had a split window, like an old-fashioned Land Rover. It's not ideal. Yeah. So yeah, that'll do. Focus. Focus. There we go. It's okay. Thankfully, it is but a tiny part of the model, and way at the back, at the bottom. These are much better. I'll take some close-ups in a moment. See if I can get them up close to the camera, get some light on them. And if you can see that. Yeah, not too bad. they're not too bad. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I'm going to let all the paint sort of finish kicking off there before I see what happens when I put a dull coat on it. I might end up having to redo it because I'll probably be using one of these. This out of the bottle is very, very dull. It goes white. So I tend to cut it with airbrush thinners, about 50-50, and get a nice matte out of that. And I'll cover the aluminium as well. You still get the aluminium shade through it, but it'll be a lot less punchy. So yeah, that's that. I will I'll check back in once everything's done. Hopefully we'll be going straight onto the cockpit from here, because now this is out of the way. I think off camera I will modify these to accept these, because this don't quite fit. I'm going to have to cut this down, cut that bauble off, and then maybe even drill out this shaft a bit. Probably it's going to be a bit of both. I probably should have done that before I started painting stuff. In fact, I know I should have done that before I started painting stuff. So I'm tired. All right, it's been a long week. Anyway, that was painting and weathering those wheels, and hopefully that's let's give you an idea on how that works. Just get that little bit of dust there. There. Yes, excellent. Well, thank you very much.